Grit, a Detroit Lions podcast. Powered by the Monroe County Reporters. Here are your hosts, Jason Harwood and Jacob Litton.
Welcome to another episode of Talking Grit. I am Jason Harwood. Over there, as usual, is my former co-worker, one of my really good friends, and guy I love talking Lions football with. It's Jacob Litton. How you doing today, Jacob?
I'm all right. Another busy day at work, as always. Ready to talk football. Lots to talk about, lots of news.
Lots of crazy stuff. I mean, we are still in the playoffs. Lots of good wildcard games this week. We're not going to talk too much about that today. We'll save that for when we wrap up and talk about next week's game. We'll kind of just put all that together. We'll talk about that later, probably Thursday night, maybe Wednesday, Thursday night. We'll have that out later on this week. So we will touch on these games. Great weekend of football, though. I mean, without getting into too much detail, you couldn't ask for much more, I don't think.
Right. Only disappointment is that the Lions were not in there.
Yeah, exactly. That was a little tough to get over. The only thing I'd probably miss at all is just the extra stress that involves is like the anticipation of the game. It's totally worth it. Don't get me wrong. But, the only thing I could look at it as the positive guy here. You look at like, okay, I can watch this as stress-free football. Although watching the Packers and Bears play just irked me to no end. So I don't know if that was stress-free or not for me.
Stress-free for me. That was the best of both worlds, honestly. You got to see the Packers lead for a while, and they thought they had it in the bag, and then the Bears do what the Bears do. The football gods or whatever's going on this year, and then, things bounce their way. Yeah. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving team for the Packers to, fall apart and lose it like that. And then the fans start calling for LaFleur's head right away. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's, as much as our fans are in turmoil, it is fun to watch the other fan bases in our division throw their hands up and just be frustrated and,
absolutely,
read their comments and drink their tears. Yeah, it's fun.
And we'll see how amped the Bears are next week. But yeah, we'll save this talk for next time.
Yep. All right. All-Pro team was announced. Lions actually had 4 players. Why don't you go through that, Jacob? Who are our 4 players that are on the Pro Bowl team this year?
Yes, 4 Detroit Lions on the All-Pro team. So right tackle Penei Sewell made the first team All-Pro. Linebacker Jack Campbell made first team All-Pro. Very deserving of both of them. But it was very cool for me to see that Jack got recognized and got in there. That was one kind of like how Kirby last year, where I was a little nervous that they were going to snub him or move him. Especially with how the team did this year. Like if they're thinking team performance and everything with the defensive struggles. Amon-Ra St. Brown made the second team as a wide receiver. And, edge Aiden Hutchinson, second team All-Pro. Great for him too. What are your thoughts on Amon-Ra? I mean, obviously he was first team 2 years in a row. This year, though, with the year that Puka Nacua had and Jackson Smith and Jigba, that, would have been a tall task, especially for him playing hurt and, everything. Jamar Chase was the other first team All-Pro.
Yeah, I'm not shocked. I'm happy that he made second team, to be honest with you. And I know his stats were up there. I would say if you ask Amon-Ra, though, based on like some of the drops he had this year, I would say that he's probably thinking this is a down year for him. And so if you're thinking that's a down year as your second team All-Pro for a 4th round wide receiver, pretty excited about that, just overall for what that means. Aiden Hutchinson getting second team, I kind of expected that, but it's also really nice to see, especially coming off the year of the injury. He got there. He made second team All-Pro. We would have loved having 4 players and then not making the playoffs. Really, really just hurts. It just, how can we have 4 All-Pros and then not make the playoffs? Something happened this year, man. Everything just did not gel. It just did not gel right. The whole season, it just, when I look back on it, and I'm sure, over the course of the next few weeks, we'll talk about this and we'll have some guests on and we'll, revisit certain topics of why this just didn't work out. At the end of the day, though, Penei Sewell and an off year, first team All-Pro. That's an off year for him. He had some injuries. And then, like you said, Jack Campbell, super proud of him that he got his first team All-Pro. I think it justifies his first round pick status, for everything that, Holmes dealt with on that particular draft night to come away with 2 players that have been all pros and, Pro Bowl players that successful day, successful draft.
Right. For sure. Yeah. Jack Campbell was the number one vote getter for linebackers as well. So, which he deserved
Yeah.
it. I mean, he was the bright spot of the defense pretty much all year for sure. And dude gave it everything he had, every play. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Well deserved. It just, obviously small consolation prize for those on an individual level, but the bigger job did not get done.
Yep. Do you think Amon-Ra, like, say he didn't have some of those key drops or whatever, do you think he could have cracked the first team all pro? Like, as good a year as, like, Puka had and Chase, do you
I
think
don't
there's a
think,
way that
I
he
mean,
gets
obviously part of it is a popularity contest, part of it's the stats, part of it is like how good your team did. And for Puka, I mean, Puka Nakua, Jackson Smith, and Jigba both got all the first team votes. Like I
Mhm.
think you get 2 like first place votes or whatever. They got all of them. Jamar Chase, I mean, is Jamar Chase. He had a really good year too. And then George Pickens kind of came out of nowhere. So George Pickens also was above Amon-Ra in the voting. I don't, how many drops did he have that were crucial that anyone outside of Detroit would really be able to look at? I mean, I
True.
think maybe those drops turned those games into wins and help, what is that, 3 or 4 more receptions and like a chunk of yards, but I don't think in the grand scheme of things it would have made a difference for the all-pro team just based on how everyone else did.
Yeah, unless you those games and those catches would have gotten a win, and that gets you into the
Right. That's why
playoffs,
I
and
said if you
maybe
turn into wins and the team gets better,
yeah,
but then you look at your competition like George Pickens, with the trade that happened for Pickens for him to blow up and do what he did for Dallas, and Dallas, obviously finished with a worse record than we did, and he placed above Amon-Ra. That's just an
mhm.
individual level. Jamar Chase, the Bengals were terrible. I don't have Jamar Chase's numbers in front of me, but I don't know. Was he above Amon-Ra in most of those stats? I don't know if statistically he was better.
Let's get those up. Let's
I
compare
mean,
the
if
two.
right, just because if we're talking about the team thing too, the Lions finished better, which doesn't mean anything. You both finished out the playoffs, but I don't think
I mean, do
Jamar
you think
Chase had.
Jamar Chase gets because he had Flacco and Browning, right? Passing to him, does that,
Absolutely, I feel like that gets
you
him
know
a
what I
little bit
mean?
better
Like,
and gets him a free
you
pass.
still, yeah. Let's see here. So
It
Amon-Ra
gives him a free
had
pass, but it does not give Justin Jefferson a free pass because Justin Jefferson did not put up those numbers, and Jamar Chase,
no, he did not. Yeah.
But at the same time, the
So
Vikings just don't feed. They do not feed him the ball like the Bengals try to feed Jamar Chase the ball.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know, like, is that Kevin O'Connell? Is he, playing it where he's gonna, distribute the ball? I mean, you could say, well, there's T.
It's not
Higgins
working.
and
I mean,
yeah, it's not. They just couldn't get on the ball. But also I think the offensive line was a huge issue for the Vikings this year too. They just didn't have the time that they normally had. And JD McCarthy, kept getting injured, just couldn't play consistently, which for a guy that missed all of last year, it's not a great sign for them. Who knows, what he's going to turn into. But yeah, Justin Jefferson, as talented as he is, and I'd say that people would still say he's probably the number one wide receiver in the league, or definitely, the top, just couldn't crack that team. Just barely got 1,000 yards, and it took until the very last game to get to 1,000 yards.
right. I would say the
So
Vikings line is better than the Bengals line, though. Like as far as that goes, I just think the Bengals game plan is like, hey, we've got Jamar Chase. We need to feed him the ball. How many deep shots they take Jamar Chase, and just how many little ways they try to get him the ball, which doesn't
all right,
equate to wins either. But I mean that the stats are there.
so
What do
Amon-Ra
we
had
got?
117 receptions, 1,401 yards. Jamar had 125 receptions, 1412. So I mean they're pretty close. 8 TDs to Amon-Ra have more than 8 TDs, right? Yeah, they hit 11. What is the average is 11.3 yards per carry or per catch for Jamar Chase. For Amon-Ra, it is 12. So actually, Amon-Ra averaged more per catch than Jamar Chase, which I would have never guessed that.
Right. But Jamar Chase
So, I
is
mean, they're
flashier,
really close.
and he's got the quarterback thing. So I'm not saying Jamar Chase doesn't deserve it. And like I said, I think like even if Jamar would have dropped, I think George Pickens had more votes than Amon-Ra. But it's still in the history books. It's still an All-Pro nod for Amon-Ra. It's just second team instead of first, and I know that that's not good enough for him.
Nope, it's not. And I mean, but honestly, he'd take no all pros and have success with the team. I know
For
that's what he'd
sure.
want. And next year will be good. Anything you can add fire to Amon-Ra is a good thing. He's such a good teammate and just a great person to have on this team. So I look forward to him to having a goal of being first team all pro next year. El Bente, one of our listeners here, said real happy for Jack, as we all are. And that's correct. I think a lot of Lions fans have that same sentiment. All right.
Absolutely.
Anything else in all pro before we move on?
No, let's move on. Let's get into this.
All right. So we're going to talk. This whole talk is going to be, because I think it's all intertwined at this point. Offensive coordinator search for the Lions and head coaches and just the whole search. We'll talk about Tomlin stepping down today. That's huge news, which, I know some people expected it. Was he going to be fired? Was not. We'll kind of touch on that and how that affects this whole Lions offensive coordinator search. So, Jacob, why don't you talk about some of the names that are out there for the Lions, who they've interviewed, who they've been interested in, and then we can talk on some other names too. So why don't you go ahead with that?
So the first noteworthy name that we have on this list is David Blau. And obviously that's noteworthy because, the rumors were like maybe the Lions could be interested. He was on the short list right away. And a lot of people were not okay with that. Well, maybe that's not what we need. And he has no experience doing this. And I'll admit, I kind of was on that fence too. I'm all for bringing him in for an interview, but I don't know if I trust him right away with the offense. The Commanders actually signed him as their offensive coordinator very quickly because, rumblings got around that he may leave that building. And they said, no, we don't need that. We don't want that. We want to keep him here. We're going to make him the offensive coordinator. So, that's awesome for Blau. Obviously, he was here as a player and everything. I do like him. Hopefully, he has success with the Commanders, but that's going to be an interesting one, if he does explode and have success and is on a short track to a head coaching job. It'll just be interesting to revisit that, a lot of fans were like, absolutely not. We'll riot if they bring him here,
Yes.
Some of the other bigger names, though, the biggest one on the list, obviously Mike McDaniel, right? Dolphins let Mike McDaniel go. Someone else that popped up right away is going to be on our list. He was supposed to be interviewing today. We're recording this on Tuesday. I believe he was having his interview earlier today.
Yep.
T. Martin interviewed yesterday on Monday the 12th. And then a name that just popped in, Mike Kafka, actually is going to be interviewing tomorrow. And I don't have the actual things in front of me right now, but Kafka is with the Giants, correct?
Yes, he was their interim coach. He was offensive coordinator, and then when Daboll got fired, then he took over interim.
Right, and he was Daboll calling the plays, though, when Daboll was there. That was what I wasn't sure if he was a play caller.
I don't know about. I don't think this year was. Last year, Daboll called the plays. The year before, Kafka called the plays.
Okay.
So Kafka has called plays. He worked under Andy Reid as well. Kafka did. So he worked for like 5 years under Andy Reid until he, moved around a little bit. If you really want to read about Kafka, Justin Rogers had I'm not saying just for you, Jacob, but for the listeners, Justin Rogers had a really nice write-up for them. So if you subscribe to his newsletter, he's been doing this with every head coach candidate or offensive coordinator candidate. He's got a nice series going. So if you really want to get in depth on who the person is, who the coach is, where their pedigree is, I'd head over to Justin Rogers. It's a very good write up on that, and he's doing it for each coaching offensive coordinator person that we get information on, and then he has his own list. So he's every day I'm getting some new information. But Kafka sounded interesting in the article. I'm not totally sold on him. I honestly, Mike McDaniel obviously is. I'm kind of interested. I just don't know about the culture fit. I just don't know how. And it's not that I don't think he's gritty or anything like that. I just don't know, like, if his demeanor, like, I don't know how he is with the players. I know his players liked him in Miami, so I would expect it to be all right. But whether he's going to mesh with the whole other coaching staff, I'm not sure.
Right, agreed, and that's a concern. Like with a lot of them. Obviously, he's got a lot of experience, but I don't know. At this point, I don't know if I'm wrong saying, but like I think no matter who they hire, I kind of have maybe too much trust that, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are going to make they're going to make a good decision, get the right person in here. Now, if this drags on and everybody that we have on our list is then signing elsewhere, and then, we're late to the party and we get somebody that's, then I might be a little concerned. But I mean, if we make a hire in the next like 2 weeks or something like that, you got to think that they came in, they interviewed well, they fit exactly what we're about. None of us were concerned about Johnny Morton either, though. And, obviously that did not turn out very well.
Yeah. I don't know if none of us were not concerned, but it was, I think it was the
I did not
confidence
think that was going to be, I did not think the fall off was going to be like that. And I mean, in the history books, when you look at how the offense did, no, there wasn't really a fall off as far as statistics and everything go. It was the season as a whole, and it was the defense more so than the offense. But I mean, when you watch those games, the stats kind of lie, and it just wasn't right.
Yeah. No, we've watched Lions football, and the offense was just different. So I don't know. Albenti says, "What's wrong with Kafka?" I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with Kafka. It's just a matter of, I mean, I don't know enough about him, and honestly, it's gonna be all work on trust of Dan Campbell. For me, like, as going in and till we hear from them, and until we see how things line up, even at train. If you think back to training camp, the defense was way ahead of the offense for like almost all of camp, if not all of camp. And so like we're like, oh, should we be worried? And then week 1 happened, right? And then we looked terrible. And then week 2 happened and we scored 52 points on the Bears. And we're like, okay, well, we were just all overreacting. But then it never just quite gelled throughout the whole season. It just never quite got there. So, whoever they hire, we're gonna have to have some level of trust of, Dan Campbell has got his guy. I'm curious though if he's like, how quick he would go to taking the play call back, or is Dan Campbell going to prepare like that might be a possibility and put other things in place so he can take the play calling back midseason and like not have it where it's taken away from all these other things. Will there be someone there to help him with game day decisions? Will he get one of these head coaches as, as an assistant coach, or, some sort of, they'll sit in the booth or whatever and they have a specific job of just time management or something like that. Some of the, one of the, because there's going to be a good head coach that's going to be out there that's not going to have, maybe not have a job. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on after all this shakes out, like where all these guys go. Do you think that's a possibility that we look at a head coach and just get him like, a specialist, like, he'd have a special title, but they have a certain duty that Dan Campbell has them assigned to?
That is interesting. Like if he was just, we're going into this, Dan Campbell's going to call the plays, but we've got somebody else in charge of, I don't know that I like that, but I mean, that could work, right? If you get the right person in there that can kind of do those things, especially if you get like a Dayball, Mike McDaniel, somebody with head coaching experience or just been around for a long time. I don't know that I hate that, but at the same time, with the success that we had, last year instead of this year, with Dan just being able to be in charge of the overall and having Ben calling the plays and everything like that, obviously you want to try to replicate that and you want to try to get that back. So, I mean, that's what I would like, but I can't say I would hate that just being the plan going forward.
Yeah. I think that's more for me a contingency. Like, I don't want Dan calling plays, to be honest with you. I want him to be able to
Right.
focus on the team, the bigger picture stuff. I think the team as a whole runs better. But I want also Dan to say, last year, John Morton didn't work out. I had to take play calling, and that was kind of midseason. We didn't have this situation set up where I got other people, in place to, do time management or whatever he needs to do. Like, let's think ahead and like get these people online. And then hopefully that doesn't happen, but let's be prepared in case that does happen. I want that just after I've been thinking about this, and I don't know I can't remember what I said last week. So if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But I've been thinking about this and that's why I kind of want Mike McDaniel. I want someone that utilizes motion a lot. I think with you got a smart quarterback like Jared Goff, You want to get all the keys and the indicators to find out what the defense is trying to do to you. And I think us using motion more as a, you can get zone, you can get, wherever where they're sliding their linebackers, who's going to be the free man. I want to know all that stuff. And so I like the idea of McDaniel running motion. Now I think Kafka runs motion offense too. I and who knows, whoever comes here, they might take on something new, but I just want that to be part of the offense is a lot of the turbo motion stuff that I don't remember seeing it as much this year as we've done in the past. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't remember seeing it as much as we used to do it.
I honestly feel like when we use motion, it was almost motion into just running, like using Amon Ra as an extra blocker, just, how they have them crashing in like that. I kind of feel like that was utilized more so than JMO rushing to the other side, Khalif moving around, fake jet sweeps, that kind of different, like that threat of them doing that. I don't feel like we saw it enough.
And I think when you got JMO, don't you want to do that? I mean, isn't that a way of taking a defender out of the play? Because a linebacker is going to slide out, a corner is going to slide out if they think JMO is going to get a jet sweep, and then you do a toss play to Jahmyr Gibbs, the opposite side, and you freeze the defense for a second. And if you freeze the defense for a second with Gibbs, that might be just enough to spring them, right? I mean, I just want to see more of that stuff where they put stuff in motion, just confuse the defense, and also just giving Goff more advantage of an indicator of what the defense is trying to do for them. He's smart. You got to utilize that.
For sure.
Albente says he wants bully ball again. I felt like the grit was just a word this season.
Well said. I think this is like the grit. We talked about that. The identity, the grit sign, with the offensive line kind of evaporated on us.
I will say this, that I still think we have gritty players. I really do. And I don't know if I would necessarily say the grit was gone, but the problem is when your identity, when you want to have your line, when you want to control the line of scrimmage, and to me, that's almost synonymous with grit. Like, at least that's the way it's been for the Lions. We did not show grit in the lines as far as like, we own this line of scrimmage and we're going to push you on, and Gibbs is going to get 3 yards before you touch him. It wasn't consistent enough. Either our guys were getting outmanned, we had injuries there, we're just missing blocks, it's beginning of the season, we're blocking wrong plays, all those type of things. I just don't think we can get away from that this year. We need to dominate our line of scrimmage and show. And then maybe we could get, along with that, Dave Montgomery is a huge part of bully ball, right? Like, it just felt like we didn't utilize him enough. And maybe that's because we were afraid of the offensive line. I don't know. But every time he seemed to touch it, we just didn't seem to give it enough for him. And, to go along with Brad Holmes' talk last week, it just seems like they're already looking past Dave Montgomery. And I feel that's a big mistake.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's not that the players that we have aren't built of the right stuff, or like you said, the gritty players. But I mean, you could be hard nosed. You could be everything that we want you to be, but like talent wise and execution wise, it's just not happening. And, even like with Graham, like Graham is the kind of player that we want, right? Graham's built with the right stuff. But at the same time, if you're not making those plays, and you could know every assignment. I know a lot of these are like, Tate, Mahogany, some, Awasika, like some of these assignments are getting blown and stuff like that. Sometimes you know the assignment, and for Graham and Decker especially, you know who you're blocking, you know what the play is, you're just not doing it. We're just not getting the job done. And that's where it's like it just kept happening at the worst time. And maybe that is kind of like the downfall, is that we just couldn't rely on the offensive line that we could before. And maybe that's why, David Montgomery's carries, when he did get carries, he wasn't getting past the line of scrimmage before the contact was happening. And before, you give him a little bit of a head start, if he's getting, 2 or 3 yards, then those turn into 4 or 5 yards with David Montgomery. But when you've got the 300-pound defensive tackle hitting you a yard behind the line of scrimmage, you can't do it. And it was just way too consistently.
Yep. One thing that I saw when we were watching the playoffs this weekend, the Eagles, the Eagles' offensive line wasn't nearly as good this year as they've done in the past. Now they had injuries to Lane Johnson and stuff like that, and you saw that directly impact Saquon Barkley. You know, what was happening in previous years, what happened last year for Saquon is that he's getting to the second level. And once he gets to the second level, he could burn all those guys. He's getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. He's having to use all his energy behind the line of scrimmage, and therefore everyone has a chance to catch up to him. He can't use all his moves. And similar thing happened to Gibbs this year for the Lions is that, Gibbs was not getting untouched to the second level very much. Um, and some of that is, I think, looking back on it, Graham, we took so much for granted that Frank was going to get the first guy blocked and then get up to the second level. He was just getting up to that linebacker. You take his guy out of the play just enough to get him out, just he was able to manhandle his guy just enough to get him out of the play, and then he could get up to second level. Graham a lot of times was either struggling with his main guy or just wasn't quick enough to get to the second level. There's so many times that I remember watching L22, especially early in the season when we were just really trying to figure out what's going on. And I just identified that Graham's just not good enough to get to the second level. And, putting the Frank Ragnow expectation on him, that I never wanted to do that, but it was very glaring what we were missing and how it affected our run game this year.
Definitely. I mean, impossible shoes to fill.
I agree. I don't think it's because of Holmes, ignored the line. So I don't know what, last year was what last year, but I think that they are going to go into this year with a goal of reestablishing that. So whatever they have to do, get more competition in that room, sign a starter or two, or whatever we decide we got to do, whether that's cutting Graham loose and getting, a center that might be available. And, as the season goes on, we'll see who the free agents are and we'll talk about those. We'll go deeper dives into who we'd want. We're not ready prepared to have that discussion right now. I think it's a little too early, but I don't think it'll be ignored. They saw how it affected this year, and I also question whether you know some of the stuff with Morton was because of our offensive line was at fault. Like was he given 100% fair shake? He wasn't given the same offensive line that Ben Johnson was. So is it can we judge him on that same level? I'm not saying I wanted to keep Morton, but also I think that he dealt with some stuff that Ben Johnson hadn't had to deal with the last couple of years.
True.
Another guy we didn't talk about was the Seahawks passing game coordinator Jake Peets. We've been linked to him, but I have not seen an interview date, so I don't know if that has happened.
Well, the
when it's
Seahawks
going
are
to happen,
still
or if it's going to
in it,
happen.
so I don't think that they can.
Yeah, I don't know if he can have like a Zoom call. I'm not sure how that I know that the whole Ben Johnson thing because we had a bye, so I think he was able to do some stuff. So we could have maybe did it the first week, but I don't know. Maybe it could have happened too. They could have had a Zoom
Right.
call. We just might not know about it too. But Lions have had some guys look for jobs elsewhere too. David Shaw interviewed for the Tampa Bay offensive coordinator position. He's our pass game coordinator. He's really good friends with Morton. So you're wondering if, is Shaw going to stay now that his buddy Morton's gone? We'll see. He'll probably interview for our offensive coordinator too. I don't know if that's going to get publicized, but I'm sure he's going to interview for that position. Our assistant special teams coach, Jet Motkins, he interviewed. And here's the one I want to really talk about. Kelvin Shepard has been linked or been requested for an interview with the Miami Dolphins. So when I saw that, I was completely shocked. What did you think about it, Jacob?
Yeah, I texted you right away.
Yeah.
I saw that. I was like, man, with the year that we had, Kelvin Shepard being a first-time defensive coordinator and really struggling for this year, getting an instant, head coach opportunity and interview was very surprising. And maybe the Dolphins are just doing their due diligence and seeing what he's got. He also played in Miami for a few years, so I don't know, what the relationship is like with the guys over there, but on one hand, good for Shep. On the other hand, it's like kind of concerning or kind of like, just very unexpected that he would already be getting, calls about being a head coach.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's this, but I'm fearing that it's a Rooney rule. Like, you're using that, and I mean, if you're Shep, you might as well do the interview. Like if you're interested, if you're truly interested, you might as well do the interview, get some experience, get your name out there. If it, if he feels he wants to go that way, I think there's value in, just getting an interview and experience that. However, I'm afraid that every candidate that they've interviewed so far has been white. And so, they're going to have to interview at least two minority candidates.
That's the rules that you need too?
You need two now. Yeah. It used to be one. And then, but they keep adding things in there, but then the teams obviously keep skirting the rules, much like the Patriots did with hiring Vrabel last year. They were going to hire Vrabel, so they just, you had to do, they tried to get Aaron Glenn last minute, and that was,
And that's when
in my opinion,
he
to
declined the interview.
save face. Yeah, exactly, because he knew what that was about. So I guess I don't really want to get into discussion about the Rooney Rule.
No.
Really not my place to talk on that, but that's what
They
I
do.
fear
Like I'm
for
looking
Shep.
at their people like that are interviewing for the job, and they do have Patrick Graham, who is is he a defensive coordinator or senior assistant? He's the Raiders defensive coordinator. So he's interviewing with the Dolphins for a head coach. He also is interviewing with the Commanders for their defensive coordinator position. So yeah,
The coaching carousel is very interesting because I asked you the question, how many of these head coaches are just going to how many of these head coaches are going to just switch teams? And Mike McDaniel is interviewing for head coaching. I think he did the Falcons. I know the Browns and the Titans probably. Uh, it's like, are they just going to trade? And you got the whole AFC South. 3 of the 4 teams are looking for coaches. Harbaugh, Tomlin, which I think
what if
I
they
don't know
just
if you saw.
rotate? They all stay in the AFC North. They just switch
And
teams.
they just move one city over. You just keep going around. They're all real close right there. Yeah, because Stefanski interviewed with the Ravens. Harbaugh interviewed, or is the Browns are interested in Harbaugh? I don't know if they. I think the only place Harbaugh's interviewed right now is the Falcons. The rest of them, he was, scouting out who he was going to be. But to me, nothing's going to happen until Harbaugh picks a destination. That's everything else is going to fall, and it really affects us too, unless we're going to go with some of these. Like if we're waiting on Mike McDaniel's probably waiting. These teams are going to go, who's going to get Harbaugh, and then if a team left is interested in McDaniel, they may take them, but they might want Harbaugh over McDaniel, so they're not going to do anything in there. So we could be in a situation where we say we like Kafka, right? But maybe we like McDaniel more, and we got to wait on McDaniel, and then Kafka goes somewhere else. And none of the
That's what I was saying. The concern is if it takes weeks, and then all of a sudden, all these candidates that we have are all gone, and then we're kind of some dark horse somewhere. That's what I don't want. But a lot of that's out of our hands.
Yeah, it's very hard too, because like there's 9 head coaching jobs open right now, right? 9. Which means there's going to be 9 now, most likely 9 offensive coordinators, 9 defensive coordinators. Like when those jobs, go up, and some of these guys might be like, Monken might be waiting to see where Harbaugh goes, and then he's just going to follow. He could follow him if they had that kind of relationship. Who knows? So you're in a tight spot, and I know why they fired Morton right away, because they wanted to get an interview, and then if a name come up, they wanted to be ready to move. They didn't want to like hold on to Morton and then, oh, we're gonna fire you, because we got someone else.
Be late to the
they
game.
just wanted to be ready to go, and just wanted to be prepared to hire someone like, and if they had McDaniel in today, it would have been nice for them to just put the bag on the table, and if they wanted him, and said, don't leave. We're going to pay you whatever you want. Sheila opens up her purse and says, we're going to pay you whatever you want. Don't leave the building. But, maybe that's not a priority for them. Maybe they want some more continuity. What?
Said, but if he still wants to be a head coach, there's still head coaching jobs out there. What?
I know.
I mean, you would think once those spots fill, then we are probably towards the top of the list of, where these guys that are offensive coordinators would want to be. They're wanting to be in Detroit. They want to have this offense. But when it's still a possibility for them to be the head coach and have complete control, it's hard to do that.
Yep. And you would expect, like, if these guys, like, if Daniel wouldn't be interviewing for head coaching jobs if he didn't want to be a head coach next year. You know what I mean? Like, why go through all that aggravation or whatever if you don't truly want to do that? So that tells me that McDaniel wants to do it, unless, it's a good bargaining chip too, right? Like, you got to pay me more to be your offensive coordinator because I might just go make more doing a head coach. Like, you could use that to your advantage too, reset your market. Uh, let's talk real quick. Tomlin being stepping down or whatever. He stepped down. He was not fired. That could be a thing to save face. The Steelers may gave him right on that, like, hey, we'd like to move on, but we're going to give you the opportunity to step down, but you're going to be fired if you don't step down. Those type of things. It could be a perception type thing. Did that surprise you that happened? That Tomlin is no longer the coach of the Steelers?
Maybe a little bit just because of how long he's been there and the fact that they made the playoffs again. But, how long was it? 7 years, 7 seasons where you make the playoffs and have not advanced? Is that right?
It's like 7 in a row.
Yeah. I mean, that's cool that you made the playoffs, but if you're not making it, if you're not getting any playoff wins, then the team's not getting better. You're not getting worse, but you're not getting better. It's kind of just, it's weird. I kind of feel like, he stepped down. He'll probably do the TV thing or whatever. He'll do that gig for a couple of years and then his name will probably come back up maybe with some more interest. But, when you're in the same place for so long, it would just be weird to try to jump into a different situation. And you also have a shorter leash at these other jobs too. Like, if you make the playoffs 3 years in a row and don't win, maybe 3 years is all you should get at one of these other places. So it, to me, feels like he probably steps out of head coaching, for a couple of years and then probably comes back. Well, how are you feeling though? Like, do you think he's right away at the top of the list? Do you think he's going somewhere else or?
I mean, I think if he wanted to coach, he would be coaching. Like the opportunity would be there. Like, I'm curious. I'm curious. This now that Tomlin's out of there, I bet you he might supplant Harbaugh in some of the circles. I bet you, I bet you they're 1A and 1B. As far as like, some of these teams might have them, they might be neck and neck. Harbaugh's got a little head start because he was let go a week earlier because Tomlin beat Harbaugh last week or the week before. So I don't know.
Yeah, this timeline could have flipped if that field goal goes in.
I know it could be. It could have been just the exact opposite. Tomlin's got the weak head start on Harbaugh, but I have not heard if Tomlin's gonna, go. But the talk was that he might do some media stuff. So I get the feeling that maybe he wants to step away for a year, and then he could have his pick of place, and then it could be even a situation where people might fire their coach prematurely to get Tomlin in there.
Yeah. You said that you think that Tomlin and Harbaugh are at the top of the list. Obviously, they have the most experience. But to me, I feel like it seems like teams are seeing the success with the younger coaches. I don't know. I think that Harbaugh is still going to be the number one person on there just because of how his connections that he has, how long he's been doing it and everything like that. I'm sure he's at the top of a lot of people's list, but I don't think that he's going to have success. I don't think that he's going to go to another team and he's going to turn let's say he goes to Vegas. I don't think that he makes Vegas better right away. And the old school style of football and everything that him and Tomlin are about, I don't know that works the same way anymore.
I think it's an interesting conversation. I think it's actually a really good conversation and a debate to have. I think that definitely the floor is higher for your team. Like, you're going to have a minimum set of competency in your team, assuming that, it's built. Like, I got to say, Harbaugh has had an unbelievable GM over there and, to constantly get talented over there. And, you could argue that he's not going to get that much anywhere else that he would go, especially not with the teams that are available, that have jobs opening right now. So, I think you're onto something there. I I want to just say that I wish that if I never want to get fired, but if I ever get fired, I would hope that I'd have a bunch of companies lining up to hire me as much as these head coaches. You failed this other job, this other location, and they're just lining up to hire you. There's only 32 of these jobs in the world, and it's like the same people keep rotating in and around to get these jobs.
Right. And I mean, Tomlin, it's weird to say, but would Tomlin, be a defensive coordinator elsewhere after being a head coach for 18 years or whatever it had been?
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't seem like that's an option.
Yeah,
Pete
I don't
Carroll.
see it.
Pete Carroll's 74 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
Is he going to go be an offensive coordinator somewhere? Like,
Yeah. That was Pete Carroll's last job, I gotta say. He might be like one of those senior advisors type. I cannot believe
that's
he's
where
not
he
been
belongs, though. That's what he did before. That's where he should have stayed.
Yes, exactly. No, that was a disaster in Las Vegas. I mean, bad. WMW2, he's one of our longtime listeners, said, "Do you think the Lions and the Eagles are in a similar tier as far as offensive coordinators versus other openings for other teams?" What do you think about that, Jacob?
It's hard for me to say this and not be like impartial or biased or whatever, but people do not like Sirianni, right? Like I don't like Sirianni, but the league doesn't like Sirianni. And honestly, AJ Brown doesn't like Sirianni. Like there's just so much dysfunction that feels like happens there. And I think maybe that's part of I think that the prospective person that's looking for an offensive coordinator position, if you're looking at the players, absolutely, I'm sure you'd be very enticed by the Eagles as you would by the Lions. Maybe more so with the Eagles. I don't know. But when you talk about who's in that building, you talk about who you're going to be dealing with all the time. That's where I think that, people like what Dan Campbell's about and people want to be a part of that. And I think that that's what would put us above the Eagles. But if you're just looking at like what players that they have and everything like that, I'm sure they're right up there with us and possibly above us.
Yeah, I think they're right neck and neck. I think that it's hard for us to not be biased and say, yes, I would rather be Dan Campbell. I mean,
Right.
I think Sirianni is one of the most punchable faces. That and LaFleur are the most punchable
Yes.
faces in the NFL, at least for me. And I know a lot of Lions fans will say Ben Johnson's up there, but he's not in the same tier as those two guys for me as far as guys that I see them on the screen and I would strangle them if they were in front of me.
Don't
And
ask that to a Packers fan right now, man.
oh man, that we got to talk about that too. That was insane. We'll say that for
Well,
Thursday.
yeah, that'll be the
That
recap.
conversation. That was awesome because yeah, I agree that I think the culture, like Albati, one of our listeners said, the culture is better in Detroit,
Yes.
and I think more people are going. I want to be with Dan Campbell now. For an outside offensive coordinator, I mean, Hurts does have some intrigue just because of the mobility. I know that probably be like if you're picking a job, Jacob, I think that you're really intrigued with his mobility. However, Goff is incredibly more accurate than Hurts throwing the ball. And if you have an OC that works on timing routes and stuff like that, you much rather have Goff. If you are someone that wants to get your quarterback out of the pocket, and create plays on their own, then you're probably leaning more towards Hurts. AJ Brown probably won't be in Philadelphia next year. I'd be completely shocked if he's an Eagle next season. But even if you lose AJ Brown, you still have Devonta Smith, you have Saquon Barkley, and you still have a solid team around there. I just don't know how much credit you want to give Hurts. Like I see him play and he just isn't consistent. And if you want to blame it on the OC, fine. I think there's a combination in there, but I just don't think Hurts is like all world QB. I know he's a Super Bowl champion, and I'll take it. I really want that Super Bowl here in Detroit, but for me, if I'm offensive coordinator and I'm like, okay, which quarterback can propel me up there? I'm thinking Goff. I'd take Goff over Hurts. But maybe if your guy wants motion, wants some mobility, then you got to go with Hurts. But I would say I would rather go to Detroit's offense.
But like I said, can't be completely impartial and unbiased, but
No,
I feel like we have
Nope.
some solid facts and decent opinions about that. It's not just
Yep.
the Lions are better, blah blah blah. I mean, the culture thing is real. And I saw something online where somebody was like, Packers fans don't like Matt LaFleur, but if Matt LaFleur, became available, a lot of teams would be calling Matt LaFleur, right? Like,
Mhm.
he'd be getting a job, he'd be a hot commodity. And
Mhm.
I forget what other coaches that they had on there that, like, the teams may not like him very much, but I mean, they'd be at the top of the list for, like, the Dolphins didn't like Mike McDaniel, right? Or Dolphins fans. The
Mhm.
Dolphins as a team and, like, the ownership and everything seem like they love McDaniel, but the fans didn't like McDaniel. They wanted him out. JJ, my son, even was like, good, he's gone, whatever. But now you've seen like he's at the top of the list. He's getting these other jobs and stuff like that. But then it's like, you know what? Eagles fans don't like Sirianni, and neither does anybody else. It's like Sirianni's going to get in their job, but people hate him. Like very disliked around the league and around fans.
Yep. Someone Albate points out that Sirianni basically gets a new offensive coordinator every year, and
Right.
that is true. I think this will be the 6th year in a row that that's going to happen, 5th or 6th year. But I will say that 2 left for head coaching jobs elsewhere, right? So you have Stryken and Kellen Moore, right? Those
Right.
2 left for head coaches.
Yep.
So it's not like they're fizzing out or whatever. I mean, it's when they get to those Super Bowl years, they're getting other opportunities. Which you would hope if you're offensive coordinator coming to Detroit, that's what you're hoping to. You get a year or 2 with the number one offense. We get that Super Bowl, and then you're all of a sudden a head coach, hopefully out of division, right? We don't want to keep any of these guys in division. Jacob, we talked for like 50 minutes and we didn't even get to the trade discussion, and I feel like I don't want to rush that at this point.
Right.
And like
No, we're gonna have
and
to
like
push that for another
we're
episode.
gonna have to push that for maybe we'll record that another day this week, because I really, just to tease it, Jacob and I looked at all the trades from the Micah Parsons trade forward in the season. We analyzed, how many trades were made. We analyzed where these teams ended up afterwards. I looked at how many snaps that each of these players got, how they helped the team, what was their PFF rank, and then we also wanted to have a little bit of discussion about what what they gave up in the future. Was that worth it? Because you can't evaluate all these trades like on in season. But the reason why we wanted to have that conversation, the reason why I wanted to breathe, is a lot of content creators, latched onto Holmes not making a trade and, made a big stink about it. If you're a certain outlet, even after his press conference, you put a bikini on the top of Brad Holmes. We are not those type of creators here. We're just try to talk about what our feelings, and try not to be clickbaity as much as some people are. So we really want to talk about that. So I think we're going to hold that off, and I'm excited to talk about that, Jacob. But you did a lot of research, and we got some good stuff. So we'll kind of leave that for the next talk. Is there anything else that you want to? I guess I want to go back to the Shep thing, because we kind of went over that really quick. Say he did get the job. Somehow he got the job in Miami. Are you devastated for our defense? Are you excited because of the opportunity to bring someone else in? What's your feeling on that?
Well, I like Shep. I mean, that would be awesome for him if he got the opportunity right away. You know, I think it would rub me the wrong way. Like, I wouldn't like it if he left, like, let's say Harbaugh gets the head coaching job in Miami and then he pulls Shep and Shep becomes the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins. That would kind of suck, I guess, because, I want him here and I like what he's about. But at the same time, we did struggle a lot in the defense, and we're going to have to make some changes, right? Next year, you're going to have to do something different. Injuries obviously played a part in that. But I mean, I don't know. It would stink, but I don't think it would be like, oh man, the sky is falling. We're doomed, But like I brought this up earlier, we didn't think that when Shep took over for AG, right? We knew it was going to look a little bit different, but we didn't think the drop off was going to be significant, and it was. So now Shep gets another shot next year. As right now, Shep gets another job next year. But let's say the defense, performs the same next year as it did this year. Then you kind of have to have those talks about moving on from Shep like you did Morton. So, I don't think it would necessarily be the worst thing in the world if he was to move off and we get somebody else in here. Especially because, I mean, some of these other names that are out there, like, let's say Shep goes to Miami. Can you imagine Brian Flores like leaving the Vikings and coming and being the defensive coordinator for the Lions? I mean, there's names, there's like some big names, there's some big things that could happen there. But, like I said before, I like Shep. I want him to be here. I think he deserves another shot.
Yeah. I think I'd want to see him. I mean, big drop off at Branch got hurt, and he dealt with Kirby. Now the thing is, that, oh, we're going to talk about Kirby and Branch, the injuries, like that's not going to continue next year. We don't know when Branch is coming back, right? I mean, he had the Achilles. The quickest you can come back is like that anyone's ever come back is 8 months, which, if that were to happen, that would put him in time for like, training camp and he could be there. But a lot of times those injuries take longer. And just because he's back doesn't mean he's back Brian Branch back, like he's going to be limited. So I think next year is going to be a tough year for Brian, even if he gets back till we get maybe towards the back end of the year. Kirby looks like this could be a long term thing. We might, who knows, we might be dealing with the same thing with Kirby next year is that, he plays or he's in a game and he got to sit out some series and then he tries to fight back through it. So, we'll know. We'll see what Brad Holmes does with bringing in guys. I know we're going to have to bring in some safeties just to prepare for this situation. I know we got Harper coming back. I hope we bring Maddox back. We'll see how that goes. But I don't want to pretend that next year is going to start out great in the back end. Hopefully, it looks like Terrion. Hopefully, he'll be back. Maybe we'll get Rakestraw. Might have some depth there. We got to decide on Rocky Sin. So much to try to figure out, but I do want Shep back. I think that he can be good. We were in the middle of the season, like after the Buccaneers game, we were like getting ready to prop him up. We are like, oh, I think our coordinators are better. And then, it was a steep drop off after that, like especially after the Branch injury. Just really never gelled. And Ali McNeil came back and he just wasn't Ali McNeil. They had him playing out of position a lot. And so I think I'm not sure. And he was coming off, an ACL injury. And so now he's, it'll be a year removed and maybe we'll get the regular lean back next year, which would be a huge get for us to have
Right.
some interior pass rush. We didn't have that all year.
Yeah, we need that. Hopefully, second year leap from Tyleek. You don't know what's going to happen with DJ Reader if he's going to be there or not. I mean, it's just going to look a lot different, right? And I
Mhm.
mean, the draft picks, we with the Tesla stuff, we got a first round pick, we got a second round pick. Other than that, they're later in the rounds. Doesn't mean that you can't find depth players, but do we draft a safety? Do we pick up somebody, in free agency? We typically are not big spenders in free agency unless we have to be. What do we do with the offensive line? There's a lot of moving parts here, and there's going to be a lot. It's not going to be the same as, from last year to this year, where it's like the defense going into the season, the defense is largely looking the same.
Mhm.
Now it's probably going to look way different.
Yep. But I'm not getting too crazy. Like, I don't think we need to go out and spend, a ton of money. That doesn't necessarily always mean that you got the best player. I will look at a small signing like Rocky Sin last year. Who would have thought that would have worked out the way it did? I mean, he was great depth to have, played really well all season. I was happy with him. I'm hoping we have him back next year. So, like, even those off the radar signings could have a huge impact on your team. So if the Lions don't go out and sign monster contracts, which I don't expect them to do because they're going to have to sign their own, still can have impact, at these different positions. And I think a focus is going to be on those lines. It's going to be because we're going to have an edge spot available outside of Aiden. DJ Reader's gone. I know we can move Tyleek over, but there's going to be some interior spots as well. And then on the offensive line, obviously we have some repairing to do there. What we're going to do with Graham, are we sticking with Mahogany? Is Tate Rallage maybe going to move over to center and that leaves us, a right guard spot? Or if we don't, we're going to have to get some center. Um, you know, will Decker retire? I mean, that's a huge question. If Decker retires, do they move Panay over? Or are they just going to leave Panay on the right side? Probably depends on who you can get to replace. There's going to be a lot of shifting going on. This is going to be a very interesting offseason. We'll be here all offseason, all up to the season, talking about this, analyzing this. And as we get past the playoffs and the players that are available become more clear, we can have, in-depth conversation about who we want at each position. And then we're going to talk about this trade thing. I'm not sure if we're going to do another episode this week, how we're going to do that, but we're going to have an in-depth talk about the trade deadline, how we feel about Brad Holmes not making a deal now that we have, hindsight, how we finished, how some other teams that made deals finish. We're going to look at all that and just kind of look at that perspective. I want to tell you that from my perspective, it's not it's kind of more nuanced. I'm looking at it's not like all pro Holmes. It's not negative Holmes that he should have made a deal. I have opinions on both sides, so I think you know hopefully we can. Hopefully Jacob's thinking along the same lines as me, but it'll be good to have a discussion about that, and I look forward to that.
Definitely. That's why we can't do it now, though.
Yeah, exactly. It's a couple comments I want to get to before we take off here. I think it's As Eagle 64. I'm not sure, or A Seagull. I'm not sure. So thanks for being out this time. Always nice to listen to some Lions content later in the evening. That's when we thrive, right, Jacob? Our kids are out, and so we talk at night. We're the vampires of Lions content here.
Nice.
I say that because I watch Blade 2. Have you seen Blade? Have you seen Blade or Blade 2?
No.
Oh man, we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. Another comment. W2 defense looks different with injuries in the secondary. Hopefully, we can get some of the crew back by training camp and branch, in the year. And El Bente says veteran center at least. I'm depending on what we do for Ratledge, but even if we move Ratledge over, you're going to want experience behind him in case the Ratledge thing doesn't work out. You're going to want to have options. So I agree with El Bente. I want to have a good center. I don't know. I don't know about Ratledge moving over. It depends on what they think. I kind of want to give him another year at guard, but we had a guy that we started at guard and moved over to center, and he ended up being pretty darn awesome. So I don't know if Ratledge is the second coming of Ragnow. That would be a tough task for anybody, but that would that's my dream at least.
Yeah, right.
All right. I am going to ask Jacob about the Blade movies, but this is it for the Lions talk. So if you're, just only Lions, and check out now. But I'm going to ask if you're interested in the Blade movies or if you like those movies. I'm going to find out why Jacob hasn't seen these yet. Part of the reason is probably they came out when you were like 9 or 10, I would imagine.
Yeah. I was trying to
Yeah.
look to see what year Blade came out. I was 8 years old. I was not watching Blade.
Yeah. And well, if your parents let you watch that movie, they were messed up because there are some crazy stuff that happens in the movie. Now, I will say Blade is a very seminal movie because it actually it's R-rated and it's very graphic, both in blood and like sexual content or whatever. But it really showed some of these studios that you could make like a gritty superhero movie. It came in after Batman and Robin or whatever, that one with, Arnold Schwarzenegger that we
The one
made
I
fun
talk
of.
about, yeah.
Like you thought, like, okay, like this is the way, all comic movies are, going campy. This went the whole other way. It is like Wesley Snipes is awesome in it. I highly recommend. There's 3 movies. The first 2 are good. The third one is not that good. That third one actually has Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel in it to help Blade out. But do you know anything about the character Blade?
I know that he was in Deadpool and Wolverine. I mean, I've seen
Okay.
little things like I know he's like he's a vampire, doesn't he? Does he do karate stuff or like is he just like
Yeah, so he's a martial artist. So like he hunts vampires. So like he is like part vampire. So his mom was bitten while he was in the womb, came out. He has all their strengths but none of their weaknesses. So he can walk in the daylight, he doesn't, silver doesn't kill him. All sorts of things. But the movie is really good
does
from
silver kill vampires? I thought those werewolves.
silver steak? Come on, man.
I thought it was just a wooden stake. I thought the
no,
silver bullet was werewolves.
Wolves? No, it's vampires too, man. Come on, you need to learn some stuff about these.
Sorry that I'm not up on my vampire knowledge.
Yeah, you could watch
Jason has
the movie.
a Twilight poster behind him.
Yeah. Yes, WM2W says one of the greatest quotes. He says like a swear word in here. I'm not gonna say. He goes, "Some people are trying to ice skate uphill." He says, puts an MF in there. It is just, it's classic Wesley Snipes. It's awesome. He is just incredible athlete, and just really good martial artist. So I do recommend watching it. Now the ending I'm going to tell you is very, um, is not. I'm not, especially from a CGI standpoint. You're probably going to laugh at it, but I think it's a pretty sweet movie, and I love that character. It's good. And Blade 2 is. Blade 2 is very, he's early especially with the CGI and just some of like the action stuff is very, but it's good. I do like it. It's a really good movie. Now, it's been a while since I've seen the third Blade movie, but I know that I didn't like that as much. But I do recommend watching that, just not when the kids are around.
Yeah, right. I'll
You're
add
not
that to
allowed
the
to do that.
list.
Yeah,
It's hard for me to
it's
take Wesley Snipes seriously, like with
why not?
White Men Can't Jump. Here's the thing. Like for me, I watched White Men Can't Jump, and it's so obvious. I was like, my God, has this guy ever picked up a basketball before? And I didn't
I
know
know.
when I watched it that it was like, oh no, he actually is terrible at sports and he can't play sports and everything. But I'm watching it, I
Yeah,
was like, man, they can't like make him a little more believable. And then Major
yep,
League even too. I was like, oh my gosh.
I know.
You probably haven't seen, but there's like I don't watch most of these shows, but there's like it's not Friday Night Lights, but it's kind of like that. There's like a Netflix show, All American maybe, or like there's some shows like that. Like JJ watches some of them, but people just make fun of them, and I see the clips online because the people that they have acting in these shows, it's like they've never thrown a football before in their life, and
Hmm.
they're supposed to be like All American quarterbacks, and it was like, oh my God, like what? They couldn't have got like a quarterback coach to show this guy how to throw for this one scene.
Yeah, Bill
That bothers me
Simmons.
when it's so obvious to me that's like, oh yeah, they're
Yeah. Do you know who Bill Simmons is? Like, he does
yeah,
The
yeah.
Ringer. Like, okay, so he won it. Like, they do a series called The Rewatchables, which is a great series. But when they get to a sports movie, they want to have a job of sports coordinator for a movie, and you would like go through with all the obvious stuff, like, okay, this situation wouldn't happen in a movie. Like,
Right.
there's got to be some continuity, but also that like this person obviously has never picked up a basketball, has never thrown a football. Like, they look totally unbelievable. And do you ever wonder, like, I could throw a football, like, I could throw a football fairly well. I'm sure I know that you can too. Like, it's so natural now that you just, throw it and it looks, good. And you could, but I've been like with people and other adults, especially with our kids, and like, it's obvious that some of these other dads have never thrown a baseball or never thrown a football. And I can't imagine living my life never having done that thing.
Right. That's why I was like, it's just different for us. Like yeah, I guess
Yeah.
for some people, like, no, they never why do they play catch? Why would they pick up a football? Why would they know anything about it? But yes,
Yeah.
they're throwing mechanics and everything.
Yeah.
It's funny because like, you know how I think you're right-handed, right? We're both right-handed, but like, when you're playing catch with the boys, like every once in a while you'll throw with your left hand or whatever just to be funny or like, whatever. And it's like it's so awkward looking. That's how some people throw, like with their
Yes.
dominant hand. That's what it looks like. And I can't
100%.
believe it.
Yes, that is really funny because I've thought that some way, but like I throw with my left hand, like, sometimes I'll just do that with the kids, like to make it even. Like, I'll be like, I'm throwing left-handed, we're playing dodgeball or something like that. I'll throw a left hand when they were younger. And yeah, you're trying to throw it and you're like having to think about it, like, okay, and then like it's like you're pushing the ball, like, but when you throw with your right hand, it's like throwing
Just
mechanics are
smooth.
there and like, and, obviously throwing a baseball is different than throwing a football, but I don't have to think about it. I just pick those things up and I just do it. And uh, and we'll my boys, they throw it. Preston, my oldest, has, he's skinny like I was at that age, but he has a pretty good arm. And I'm always just amazed that he could just fling it the way that he flings it. But then he'll have kids over that obviously don't play sports, and it's like it's embarrassing to watch try to throw the football. You're just like, you feel bad for the kid because like they totally, there's a whole group of kids playing football and you're the kid that can't, throw it. I feel really bad. It's like the kid in Sandlot, like, where he,
Yeah, right.
can't throw the baseball. He's like, chuck it like a
Of
paper
course.
or whatever, and
Yeah.
yeah, you feel bad for Smalls.
That's the kind of the age that these kids are in though. They're on the
Uh-huh.
computers, they're on their tablets and stuff. They're not all it's not like every single person plays little league baseball or not everyone plays
I know.
t-ball on the way up or whatever. But it's funny,
Yep.
just real quick about the left-handed thing. JJ's a Dolphins fan. Well, Tua throws left-handed. So like when I'm throwing left-handed, I'll say like Tua, almost like Kobe. I'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
Tua. And then when it comes out weird or like, it falls and hits the ground or whatever, I was like, that's pretty accurate if you think about
Yeah.
it. Like
Nice.
I rag him all the time.
Vic was crazy. Like, he's throwing left-handed, but he could throw like a rocket. Like, I don't think he knew exactly where it was going all the time. He was mostly for his legs, but man, especially when he was with Philadelphia, there were some throws that he made to like Deshaun Jackson that
Deshaun
were
Jackson,
just unbelievable.
right?
Yeah. All right, man. I'm ready to wrap up here.
Yep,
I
we're
got an
good.
interview for a job tomorrow, so hopefully, that goes well.
You
So
need your sleep?
I gotta prepare for
Need
that.
your rest?
Yeah, I do. It's not beauty rest. I don't have enough time for that, but I just need to be, cognizant of,
I don't
and
think you have
prepare a
enough
little
time
bit.
to get that much rest.
No, there's not enough time in the year for that. And not for my 45-year-old body. Nope, that's long gone. All right, man. We'll do the trade talk. Jacob and I were talking first. We're like, this will be a quick episode. We're gonna fly through this, and here it is. Like, we get 50
Never
minutes in,
fails.
and we didn't even get to the main topic that we wanted to get to. So, well,
But
but
we
that's
appreciate
good.
all the comments, everybody in the chat.
Yeah,
Definitely
exactly. Guys,
asking
add
great
to it.
questions, good insight.
Yes, it's awesome. We love it, and I think it does add to the show. So thanks for spending some time with us. All right, for Jacob, the guy's never seen Blade. He's gonna have to see Blade. He's added it to his list. I'm Jason. I have seen Blade, and if you haven't seen it, go see it. Just don't have your kids around. All right, let's go Lions.